I like what Marv just says. A beaver just asked, is 4 people in the group okay? Yeah. Because the rules say only 3. Yeah, so I was tempted to say that's okay because I care about every one of those 4 people. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But for group dynamic sharing, I think it's better to actually have 2 and 2 rather than to have 4. Okay, so it's either a threesome or a twosome. Okay? As Peter's passing this out, this will kind of get wet your whistle for what's going to happen in a month. Each totem has different challenges on the hero's journey. So guardians, artisans, idealists, rationals. Can you guess what they might be? All right, so for example, remember I told you that the Obi-Wan Kenobis and the Morpheus kind of mentors, that they enter in where in the hero's journey? They're in the very beginning, okay? So usually the people, the Luke Skywalkers and the Neos, they're dolphins. Okay, so they're really searching for who they are, and they know there's a problem, they know that there's a need, but they're not convinced that it's them. Like how can it be that this ordinary person, even Frodo I think, it fits in this whole thing. And so the challenge on for the hero's journey, even for spiritual growth, is for the mentor to come in, the right kind of mentor to come in early for the idealist, for the dolphin. Just to get them, this is going to be worth it. I'll be with you every step of the way, right? That sort of thing. For the rationals, they just need to be convinced. If you can prove to me that being more spiritually mature is the right thing to do, all right, makes sense, I'll do it. What they tend to do is they tend to go by themselves. Okay, so they're not as connected to that, and then they tend to either burn out because they went by themselves, or they bottleneck a lot of this stuff because they're still trying to take on all the problems and solve them, and they're not good delegators. Okay, so usually at the point where they're ready to just throw up, they're so upset with people and, you know, where's everybody when you need them? That's usually when they need their mentor to come along and say, well, some of this is of your own making because you ran off by yourself thinking that as long as you understood what the problem was, what the solution was, that you can actually do it all. The artisan, who did I describe this artisan in a movie terms? Well, not just Flame, but the whole Tom Cruise, almost every role that Tom Cruise plays. Right? If you're an artisan, if you're a fox, the challenge is that you're too quick to go on the journey. Right? And you judge everybody else because you're taking so long. And so you jump in the cockpit, you take off in the plane, you don't need, I'm already a great pilot, right? And you have all these great skills and you're getting this nice rush. And then in the Top Gun movie, because of his recklessness, his wingman dies. And it's at that point that he's broken and he wants to quit the whole thing. And that's when the mentor enters in as his commanding officer, if I remember the movie correctly, right? But now he's teachable, okay? So the challenge for an artisan, for a fox in the hero's journey, comes way more into the journey. Okay, so they're seeing like, why do I have to be mentored to go on the journey? I'm already ahead of the mentor. Like I'm going, and it's later when they get humbled that happens. Guardians. Okay, what's the challenge for the hero's journey for the guardians?
Being too conventional.
Okay, too conventional. The challenge is they never go on the journey. They stay home. Yeah. So, because home is what I understand. Home has, everything makes sense, everything has its place. If a guardian goes on the journey, even spiritual maturity, they tend to bring their world that they understand, that's safe, with them. I have this image in mind either of, wherever they go, they have this little Airstream trailer, right? Or they're like a hermit crab. So they have this shell that is this world that they require. So you can imagine if a guardian goes on the mission field to a Muslim country, right? Whether Christianity is like not existent, the guardian's tendency is to recreate their world where they are. So they'll build a little compound, they'll bring an American curriculum for their children, and anyone that they convert into their world, and they're usually not very successful at impacting the larger world around them, but they don't realize that even though they're on the mission field, that they haven't actually left home. Does that make sense? Okay, so the crisis for the guardian is to actually get to this place where their whole world falls apart. And they realize that their need for control and predictability is actually the biggest obstacle to them actually doing anything that needs to get done. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so this is the stuff that we're going to develop next month when we come back. We're going to go deeper into each one of our totems challenges. Do you see how that works now? That based on our personality, the challenge comes at a different place in the journey, and it's a different challenge. Okay, let me explain your homework before we get to your questions. Because once we get done with our groups, then you're free to go. We don't have to come back here. So we're giving you two things. The green sheet is your inciting incidents backstory sheet. And as I said at the outset, the older you are, the more room you need. Okay, it's just logical. So depending on how you want to do it, some of you like starting from when you were born and then working forward. Other people want to start where we are now and working backwards. There's no rhyme or reason to that. I would encourage you to do it in pencil and to kind of do relative length of line, like you saw in mine. So lower is it was significant, but not compared to that one. And just visually, you'll be able to stand back, right, and go, oh wow, that's kind of interesting where that thing hit in my life. And then you're not done until you can go back and figure out what is the redemptive purpose of the things below the line, especially some of the big negative turns. Now, remember, an inciting incident really doesn't have chicken exits. Okay? Now, when I moved down here from Northern California, I could have moved back. So there was a chicken exit. But there was enough that happened that I didn't want to move back. Okay? All right, so that's number one. The other homework is a reading. And one of the outcomes of me now hanging out at seminary every week is you're going to get some of this kind of stuff. This is from one of the most brilliant New Testament professors around, Dr. Marianne Mai Thompson. And her article is about where do we see the mind of Christ in the Gospels, in the first 4 books of the New Testament. And we would like you to read this before you come back, because if you remember, the goal of every Christian, what we're presuming in this class, what we want is to have more of the mind of Christ. And so there's some great scripture references. I think it's really fascinating about seeing what does that look like in real life. How did Jesus live out his mind? Okay, so when we come back, we're going to assume that you've read it. But we're also going to probably see your 4 temperaments come out too. So the Beavers would have all read it. Probably 5 times. No, Rationals would have read it 5 times, right? Just to make sure. And anyway, that'll be interesting. So you got the homework? Right? All right, so here's your questions. How well do you relate to the general description of your totem? What are your totem's weaknesses and strengths? And so even though we didn't go into super detail, which is the next session, what are you already figuring out? Okay? And number 3, based on your totem's weaknesses and strengths, how do you think it's affected your spiritual journey so far? Has it seemed easier or harder to grow closer to God, and why or why not? Let me say, just to help you understand this third question, I think most devotional materials are not written by dolphins, even though dolphins tend to be the ones with the candles and tree bark all over their face, right? Who do you think most devotional materials are written by? Beavers, right? It assumes all this discipline. You're going to do this and this many times and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a dolphin like me and you didn't know that and you buy all this devotional material, you fail a lot, right? And then you beat yourself up. Right? And you're like, I'm just not. And it's like, well, maybe I need to get devotional material from a dolphin, right? Because it's not just beavers that have the fruit of the Spirit. It's not just beavers that produce good fruit. So anyway, that's just one example of how not understanding that there is more than one totem, and how that certain materials for a long time have come out of a certain corner of this whole grid. And that's just one example of how, wow, so maybe I actually kind of got discouraged a lot when in fact it was something else. Okay? All right, so the 3 foxes, you already have a group. Okay? So it's Michael and Nils and, oh, there's 4. Oh, we have more than 3. Okay, so if you're a fox, why don't you go over here to the outside area, find each other, and then you can split up into 2 groups. How many dolphins do we have? Okay, so dolphins meet by the fountain and no more than 3. Okay, these are your questions. Let's see, foxes. No, we already did foxes. Owls. Okay, so owls meet by the basketball hoop and then divide yourself up. And then beavers. Okay, beavers can stay here and just figure out. Yeah, okay.